This young woman possesses a very special ability. Whatever she sees in her dreams comes true. Today was no different. The man in the black coat before her had appeared in her dream. Seeing her daughter's distress, her worried mother pressed her for details. Hongju recounted that she had dreamt of him 3 months prior. In the dream, it was snowing, and he lit a cigarette lighter which then exploded. Hearing her daughter's dream, the mother was certain something big was about to happen, as all of Hongju's dreams had come true in the past. Mother and daughter rushed to the parking lot to stop the man. However, the man was annoyed and disbelieving. He angrily shoved them both to the ground and drove away. Hongju helplessly watched his taillights disappear into the darkness. Although her mother had quickly grabbed the man's lighter, Hongju knew it was useless. Her dream would inevitably come true. To survive, he had to listen to her, but who in their right mind would believe such absurd claims? Her father, too, had disbelieved her, leading to his demise. Nothing could be changed, regardless of who was involved. Knowing it beforehand didn't prevent it. She could only blame the man's unfortunate fate. Returning home and falling asleep, Hongju dreamt that she woke up in a hospital and learned that her mother had died in an accident. She awoke in distress, her emotions overwhelming, her eyes swollen. She meticulously documented everything she saw in her dreams. Later, leaving her room, she saw a news report about a horrific accident, exactly as she had dreamt. The victim was the man in black. While smoking in a gas station, he had caused a large explosion and perished. Hongju was terrified that everything she dreamt became reality. She felt frantic, grabbing scissors and cutting off her long, lustrous hair despite her mother's attempts to stop her. Hongju feared her mother's fate would mirror the man's, ending in tragedy. After calming down, she recounted everything to her mother. But her mother only offered comfort, saying she wouldn't die so easily. She even complimented her daughter's new short haircut. A new day began. New neighbors had moved in across the street, a very handsome pair of brothers. Contrary to her mother's excitement, Hongju worried when she recognized the older brother from a dream. To prevent this unfortunate destiny, she decided to avoid the new neighbors and try to drive the brother away with coldness. Her plan initially succeeded. While happily waiting for the bus, she encountered the neighbor approaching her. Worse, he sat next to her. Even when Hongju moved, he followed. Thinking he was pursuing her romantically, Hongju confidently declared she wasn't interested. Unbeknownst to her, he was only giving up his seat for the school children standing nearby. Mortified, she quickly boarded the bus, ignoring the laughter of others. Only after the bus departed did he realize that the voice belonged to the unfriendly neighbor who had rejected his kindness. Today was Yi Chan's first day as a full-fledged prosecutor. Overjoyed, he took a selfie in front of the office, oblivious to his colleagues observing him. Suddenly, hearing Yu Bam's voice, he snapped back to reality. They were former teacher and student, now colleagues. Their relationship seemed strained. Yi Chan felt uncomfortable seeing his former teacher there. Yi Chan's past, 13 years prior, continued to haunt him. Yu Bam had been his tutor, but Yi Chan's academic performance steadily declined. To receive a bonus from Yi Chan's father, Yu Bam devised a plan to fabricate a fake report card to fraudulently obtain the reward. At that time, Yi Chan was at the bottom of his class. Yu Bam proposed that for each grade improvement, he would receive 10,000 won. Initially, Yi Chan refused, but when Yu Bam suggested splitting the bonus to buy a motorcycle, he couldn't resist. That fateful decision irrevocably changed Yi Chan's life. After successfully creating the fake report card, he finally had enough money for his dream motorcycle. Everything would have remained hidden if Yu Bam hadn't been involved in a car accident. In a panic, he blamed Yi Chan. He even threatened to fabricate evidence to make Yi Chan appear to be the driver. Faced with Yu Bam's terrifying threat, Yi Chan, despite his anger, was powerless. After being arrested and taken to the station, Yi Chan met his father. His father angrily demanded to know where he got the money for the motorcycle. Though Yi Chan claimed he earned it, his father didn't believe him, suspecting he had stolen it. In a moment of anger, Yi Chan inadvertently revealed the forged report card. This deeply disappointed his father. Yi Chan blamed himself for hurting his father. Years passed, and he finally became a prosecutor, a position many aspired to. This time, he was determined not to repeat his past mistakes. One evening, while taking a selfie with his newly purchased car, Yi Chan unexpectedly encountered Yu Bam. Even more surprisingly, the person Yu Bam was dating was Hongju. After a brief greeting, Hongju and Yu Bam entered a restaurant. Despite the date, Hongju was distracted. She was anxiously trying to reach her mother. Before leaving, she remembered to turn off all the electrical appliances in the house, even blowing out the candles. However, she forgot to lock the front door. Remembering this, she rushed back home, abandoning the dinner. At the same time, a stranger was following her mother. Due to heavy snowfall, taxis were unavailable. Yu Bam, wanting to impress his date, offered to drive in the adverse weather conditions. In the car, Hongju's mother called her. She had forgotten her phone at the restaurant and returned to retrieve it. Hongju was relieved to know her mother was safe. As a precaution, Hongju curiously asked Yu Bam if he could protect her mother. Although he didn't understand the question's implication, Yu Bam agreed. However, a moment of inattention while driving led to a horrific accident. After the accident, Hongju awoke in the hospital. The first person she called was her mother. She was devastated to learn that she had been in a coma for over 10 months, and her mother had died of a stroke. Her mother had sold their house, working tirelessly from morning till night to cover her medical expenses and compensate the accident victim's family. Reading her mother's suicide note, Hongju was heartbroken and couldn't accept the reality. Everything mirrored her dreams. After calming down, she discovered she was accused of causing the traffic accident. Hongju requested the prosecutor's cooperation to find justice. However, all the evidence was against her. Yu Bam had deliberately lied, fabricated the scene, and moved her from the passenger seat to the driver's seat. All the evidence gathered by the police pointed to her as the driver. Powerless against the adversity, Hongju decided to end it all on the rooftop. Despite Yi Chan's attempts to dissuade her, he couldn't save her. Yi Chan screamed in despair and then abruptly woke up. It had all been a dream, a bizarre dream that left him with a heavy heart. Coincidentally, today was the day the tragedy in his dream was supposed to unfold. To verify things, Yi Chan decided to go to the restaurant where they had their date. Just as he'd dreamt, they were there. Despite trying his best to pull Yu Bam away, he couldn't. His only option was to wait in his car to prevent the accident. The snow began to fall, reinforcing his belief that his dream was real. Everything was unfolding as he had seen it. Yu Bam was the one driving the car that would cause the accident. Desperate, he could only follow them to prevent the accident. Yi Chan risked ramming his car into theirs to stop them. He slowly approached, opening the car door like a savior, to the astonishment of Hongju and the stunned silence of the would-be victim. After confirming everything was all right, he was satisfied with the outcome, despite Yu Bam's anger. He recounted his entire dream to them. Naturally, Yu Bam wouldn't believe such nonsense. Only Hongju noticed the similarities between their dreams. If no one else believed him, she would be the one to put her faith in Yi Chan. She approached him with intense emotion, giving him a warm hug in the freezing cold. The simple words, "I believe you," truly moved Yi Chan. After the police arrived at the accident scene, they were both quickly taken to the hospital. In the ambulance, Yi Chan recounted his dream to her. He thought she wouldn't believe him, but Hongju thought differently. She, too, had experienced similar strange dreams, only this time, he had actually changed it. To his surprise, she revealed something even more shocking. The accident he had just prevented would be shifted to someone else. For better or worse, things would begin to change from now on. Since he had saved her, Hongju's feelings for him grew warmer. Every morning, she went to places Yi Chan had been in his dreams, hoping to encounter him. She subtly arranged things to make him comfortable on his way to work. After much planning, they finally met on the train. But contrary to her excitement, he seemed despondent. Yi Chan didn't want to believe what he saw in his dreams, because when he saw someone suffering in his dreams, he felt compelled to help. If he couldn't, he would relentlessly blame himself. Even she couldn't bear this cruel reality. Therefore, he wanted her to forget about it. But Hongju disagreed. After all these years, someone could finally change his dreams. He was the special person she had been searching for. To pursue him openly, Hongju coldly broke up with the unscrupulous lawyer. At the same time, at an international piano performance, a case of domestic violence was discovered. The police immediately arrested the husband for investigation. Only the daughter remained, enraged that her mother had been beaten unconscious. Revenge filled her thoughts. Luckily, a friend intervened before she could do anything rash. She was helpless, knowing her father would never be brought to trial because of the weak prosecution and the cunning lawyer. Yu Baim was an expert at twisting narratives to benefit his clients. He would manipulate the charges from causing injury to domestic violence. Regardless of her mother being brutally beaten in an elevator, resulting in 6 broken ribs, the sly lawyer would easily change the charges. Only when the victim wants the perpetrator punished is it considered a crime. So Yoon knew her mother feared her father more than the law, so she could only obediently follow his demands. With no other options, she wanted to free her mother. At the prosecutor's office, Yi Chan was handling the domestic violence case but constantly faced obstruction from the lawyer, who pressured him to close the case. A fierce confrontation ensued, neither willing to yield. To win, he decided to work late, clearing all the office's backlog. His colleagues, seeing his frantic energy, thought he was drunk. After a long day, he fell asleep at his desk. In his dream, he saw his younger brother, Seung-won, being arrested, while he was helpless. Worried, he called to check on his brother. Learning Seung-won was safe at school, he breathed a sigh of relief. However, his dreams had never been wrong. To verify everything, he had to go to Hongju's house. Seeing his worried expression, Hongju sensed Yi Chan's anxiety about his recurring premonitions. Yi Chan had to ask for her help. Hongju appeared in his dream, too. He didn't want his inaction to lead to Seung-won's arrest. Hearing the name, she realized he was the murderer from her dream. He had said he became a murderer because of his brother. In Hongju's dream, she'd seen a couple arguing. The husband was violent. At that moment, their daughter and Seung-won appeared. Trying to stop the man, Seung-won accidentally pushed him off the balcony. Yi Chan realized this was the case he was handling. His apprehension grew. They rushed to the apartment. Seung-won was preventing his friend from buying poison. Learning the foolish prosecutor was his brother, he was utterly disappointed. No matter how many times he called, Seung-won wouldn't answer. To prevent his brother from doing something reckless, Yi Chan and Hongju had to act. Yi Chan stood in front of the elevator to stop Seung-won, while Hongju would pull the fire alarm to attract attention and call the police. This false alarm changed the impending tragedy. Seung-won avoided arrest. Seeing his brother's determination, he changed his mind. Yi Chan was determined to bring the abusive husband to justice. As if by fate, the police officer at the scene was the one Yi Chan had saved from the accident. This officer also began to have strange dreams like Yi Chan and Hongju. Seeing the girl from the accident, he curiously stopped to ask about her and drove everyone home. To prevent further abuse, Hongju invited the mother and daughter to stay at her house. Back in his room, Yi Chan remembered his father. Though strict, he had always loved and protected him. Wanting Yi Chan to have a better life, his father had always pushed him to study hard. He was Yi Chan's strongest support. However, while shopping, his father had died heroically trying to apprehend an armed deserter. His father's bravery gave Yi Chan the strength to face challenges. The next morning, on his way to work, he met Hongju waiting for him. To compensate for the damaged car, she revealed lottery numbers. Though pretending indifference, after she left, he kept repeating the numbers. Knowing the lottery results, Yi Chan confidently challenged his superior. Despite his superior's order to close the case, he refused. All the evidence he gathered pointed to the husband as an abuser. His superior, furious, dismissed him. His defiance quickly spread through the company. Most admired his confidence, but a few felt sorry for him, believing he would be fired. Lost in thought about the case, Yi Chan unexpectedly ran into Officer Wu Tak, the man whose life he had saved. Wanting to thank Yi Chan, Wu Tak had been waiting and invited him to dinner. Whether by coincidence or design, they chose the barbecue restaurant owned by Hongju's family. Seeing them laughing and talking intimately, Yi Chan felt a pang of jealousy. But what surprised him even more was seeing his younger brother working there. It turned out his younger brother was trying to impress a girl staying at Hongju's house, which was why he was working there. It seemed this dinner was more complicated than Yi Chan had anticipated. Wu Tak had also developed the ability to foresee the future. To test his new ability, he'd altered reality by refusing a dinner with colleagues and instead invited Yi Chan. Everything was unfolding exactly as he'd foreseen in his dream. from the customer's seating arrangement to the food on the table. If his dream was accurate, a special guest would appear in the next 5 seconds. At that moment, the door swung open. Lawyer Yu Baim entered, surprising everyone. Knowing the whereabouts of the mother and daughter, he had come to confront them. Yi Chan was shocked by his appearance, but Wu Tak remained calm, observing the subtle changes he had wrought. A tense atmosphere filled the restaurant. The lawyer was there to pressure them, threatening that if the husband divorced, he wouldn't give the mother and daughter any assets. This meant the daughter's dream of studying abroad would be shattered. She would lose her future and her potential. As a loving mother, she couldn't stand by and watch her daughter's future be destroyed. The lawyer's words deeply affected her. Everything was happening exactly as Wu Tak had dreamt. He began to fear the horrific event he'd foreseen. In his dream, the girl would injure herself with chopsticks. Just as things were escalating, Yi Chan angrily slammed his fist on the table, grabbing everyone's attention. He had heard the entire conversation. From a prosecutor's perspective, he argued this wasn't domestic violence, but assault. No matter how much she pleaded, he would prosecute the husband to the fullest extent of the law. He'd read the husband's apologetic letters and felt they didn't change anything. Yi Chan firmly declared he would seek the harshest possible sentence. Turning to the mother and daughter, he comforted them, urging them to stay calm and trust him. His sincerity touched the girl, causing her to finally put down the chopsticks. Wu Tak, observing from behind, smiled with satisfaction. The small change he'd made had prevented a terrible moment. Afterward, Yi Chan became curious about why Wu Tak had brought him there. It was clearly intentional. Wu Tak cheerfully replied he would only explain if Yi Chan treated him to a second meal. Having no choice, Yi Chan agreed to buy him snacks at a convenience store. Of course, Wu Tak wasn't satisfied with this second meal. Before Wu Tak could complain further, Yi Chan impatiently cut to the chase. Honestly, even Wu Tak couldn't believe his dream had come true. He was surprised when Yi Chan said that not only he, but also Yi Chan and Hongju could have this strange type of dream. Yi Chan's saving of Wu Tak's life was also thanks to such a dream. Wu Tak began to suspect it was a contagious condition. They speculated on various possibilities, from licking yogurt lids to blood types, but none seemed plausible. The only seemingly logical connection was that the dream ability started after someone was saved. Looking on the bright side, these dreams were a blessing, as they allowed them to prevent bad events from happening in the future. After saying goodbye to everyone, Yi Chan returned to his office despite the late hour. He decided to burn the midnight oil, poring over every document related to the case, even if it meant working overtime. The next morning, his colleagues were surprised to find him still there. Not only that, but he even dragged a senior colleague along to collect witness statements at the crime scene. Another long day passed. On the familiar bus, Hongju waited for him. After a grueling few days, Yi Chan unknowingly drifted off to sleep on her shoulder. Their feelings for each other deepened. Now, she only had him in her mind. Witnessing his dedication filled her with satisfaction. Today was the final day of investigation into the domestic violence case. Yi Chan showed more determination than ever. In the interrogation room, he confidently presented his strong arguments, coupled with an intimidating demeanor and impressive gestures to pressure the husband into confessing. But it was all a rehearsal for the real interrogation. He didn't expect his colleagues to be watching him perform through the one-way mirror. However, his passionate approach changed people's perception of him. All the witnesses related to the case were summoned. As the atmosphere reached a fever pitch, Wu Tak unexpectedly called Yi Chan. He urged him not to conduct the interrogation of the abusive husband and to leave it to their senior colleague. In Hongju's dream, the husband would be released for lack of evidence if Yi Chan interrogated him. Although there was no concrete basis, Wu Tak's dream showed the culprit being arrested by the investigating officer in charge. Both dreams had similar storylines but different outcomes. After hearing this, Yi Chan was hesitant. He feared the investigating officer who had close ties to Yu Baim would undo all his hard work. But now, there was no other choice. Yi Chan could only rely on this officer. As expected, upon seeing the change in interrogators, lawyer Yu Baim smirked triumphantly. The interrogation began. The husband pleaded not guilty, despite the presence of all the witnesses. The lawyer had rewritten the story to favor his client, claiming the wife had fabricated the assault to extort 100 million won. He even presented a recording of their conversation at the restaurant as evidence. After hearing the evidence, the investigating officer began to side with the husband's story, causing the witnesses discomfort. Yi Chan felt like he was sitting on a powder keg. He was anxious as he watched the culprit about to escape conviction. Just as he was about to intervene, the investigating officer suddenly changed his tune. He asked the witnesses what the defendant had said after his wife fainted. They all replied that he said, "I didn't do it." This was the key to solving the case. If he truly loved his wife and children as he claimed, the first thing he would do upon seeing his wife faint would be to seek medical attention, not to deny hitting her. That statement was his undoing. Yi Chan realized this unusual detail. He confidently stepped forward and accused the husband of assault. All the evidence was presented, including the video recording of the wife fainting. Yi Chan threatened that if he continued to lie, this evidence would be used against him in court. Although the lawyer tried to stop the interrogation, it was too late. Terrified, the abusive husband confessed to everything he had done. Finally, Yi Chan successfully convicted him, just as the dreams had foretold. The case was successfully resolved. Lately, Hongju has been plagued by a recurring nightmare. In her dream, she finds herself unconscious in a forest. Upon waking, she's left with a lingering feeling of being trapped in a dream, a chilling sensation that sends shivers down her spine. Fortunately, her mother's voice wakes her from this dark nightmare every morning, providing the motivation she needs to carry on. As a persistent habit, Hongju visits the same cafe every morning and waits for Yi Chan. Seeing her expectant look, he can no longer avoid her. Curious, he asks about her work and why she always seems to be around him. Actually, Hongju herself isn't sure if she should continue her career as a reporter. While she longs to work, she fears her dreams might come true. At the same time, while cleaning her daughter's room, her mother discovers a letter of application for her return to work. She's disappointed that her daughter wants to return to being a reporter. It's not that she disagrees, but she fears for her safety. Although Hongju initially decided to quit, her perspective changed after meeting Yi Chan. His ability to alter the future gave her renewed hope. However, no matter how much she tries to persuade her mother, she remains unconvinced. In her mother's eyes, Hongju is a vulnerable girl who constantly worries others, which is precisely why she wants to protect her. Hongju feels her mother's love deeply. Just as she's overcome with emotion, two police officers enter Wu-Tak and his senior colleague. He'd spent his meager salary on barbecue just to see Hongju. While clearing the table, Wu-Tak voices his thoughts. The fact that the three of them are having strange dreams must follow some pattern. If they can figure out how it works, they might be able to prevent bad things from happening in the future. Suddenly, Hongju curiously asks what would happen if he dreamt of his own death. Hesitantly, Wu-Tak says he would change the outcome, which pleases her. Her mother, however, is displeased and angrily chases them out. After the police leave, Yi Chan's group arrives. They're all curious about Hongju, wondering what she's like and why the prosecutor is so captivated by her. Before eating, they all pray. However, the group disagrees on a case. Some want to severely punish the person who gave the car keys to a drunk driver, while others believe he's not guilty. Yi Chan hasn't decided which side to take. Both sides have valid points, so he needs to think carefully to resolve the situation. Hongju arrives with beer. She points out that their pre-meal prayers contradict the principle of religious freedom. The probability of all four of them being Christian is incredibly low, given that only 20% of the South Korean population is Christian. The likelihood of four people sharing the same religion is even smaller than seeing a double rainbow. This suggests someone is lying about their religion. Therefore, Yi Chan's willingness to openly declare he's not religious is brave, not cowardly as others suggest. Her sharp observation earns everyone's admiration. Back at the company, her new boss realizes she's the renowned reporter Hongju, the one who exposed the corruption of high-ranking officials. However, nobody knows why she quit. That evening, after work, Hongju sees the fried chicken shop owner feeding his cats. He's skimping on customer portions to feed them. She considers approaching him, but exhaustion makes her change her mind and walk away. Back home, another dream flooded her mind, a vision of the candlelit confession at the university, a fire breaking out, and the cafe worker becoming a victim. To prevent the tragedy, Hongju grabbed a fire extinguisher from the cafe and rushed to save the worker before the flames reached the gas. She quickly extinguished the fire. However, the students mistook her actions for sabotage and angrily chased her to settle the score. Yi Chan had a similar dream and rushed to the scene. Fortunately, he arrived in time to save her before things got worse. His presence gave her the confidence to return to her job. Witnessing her daughter's determination, her mother started to waver and decided to talk to Yi Chan. She wanted him to protect her daughter, because only he could change her future. She finally agreed to let her daughter return to her work as a reporter, which filled Hongju with joy. Today was her first day back. Hongju felt anxious standing before the company building. While she hesitated, Yi Chan appeared, taking her hand and walking her to the office. This boosted her confidence. However, upon seeing her new uniform, the terrifying dream haunted her again. But with Yi Chan, she no longer had to face it alone. Unlike Hongju's good fortune in having someone to trust, the university student she saved received devastating news. Her older brother died in a traffic accident, and tragically, her older brother was driving. While the prosecution wanted an autopsy to confirm the cause of death, the older brother wanted his younger brother to be cremated without an investigation. Because the family refused an autopsy, the prosecution couldn't do anything. After the cremation, the older brother fled with a substantial insurance payout. Suspecting foul play, the prosecution issued a warrant for his arrest. He quickly withdrew the insurance money and sought help from lawyer Yu Bam. Initially, he feigned innocence and portrayed himself as a victim of wrongful accusation. But Yu Bam was familiar with such characters. After hearing the whole story, the lawyer realized he was a cold-blooded killer who murdered his brother for insurance money. Though reluctant to help such a despicable person, Yu Bam was blinded by greed. Helping him escape conviction would mean a large sum of money for him. In Yi Chan's dream, he saw himself dating his neighbor. They watched a news report she produced, covering the insurance fraud murder case that the prosecution was investigating. Today was Hongju's official return to work after a long break. To reassure her, Yi Chan decided to walk her to the television station, holding her hand. Choosing a topic for her comeback was crucial, so she tirelessly gathered information. Her first stop was Wu Tak's police precinct. They chatted endlessly, without deciding on a story. Then, her superior called. Hongju panicked, unsure how to respond, but Yi Chan suggested a story. The recent surge in poisoned stray cats, a potential mass murder case involving Xano poison. Although she wasn't keen on animal stories, her superior considered it a major case, so she had to investigate it. At the prosecutor's office, while everyone was discussing the insurance fraud murder case, Yi Chan suddenly recalled his dream from the previous night. Worried, he asked if the suspect's identity was correct. The other prosecutors were surprised that he knew this information. Everything matched his dream, except the victim was the suspect's younger brother. This revelation indicated that the younger sister was also in danger. While the case seemed straightforward, the suspect's lawyer, Yu Bam, made everyone wary. Despite overwhelming evidence against him, Yi Chan had a bad feeling about the trial. He feared the prospect of the suspect being acquitted and released, leaving him free to confront the greedy lawyer. Prosecutor Shin, who was leading the trial, presented substantial evidence. This included a contract for 31 types of insurance, with monthly payments exceeding 4 million won. The suspect had staged a car accident to murder his brother and collect the insurance payout. He had falsified accident reports with 7 insurance companies. With all this evidence, it seemed the suspect was cornered. However, lawyer Yu Bam was not an easy opponent. On behalf of his client, he confidently denied all charges and pleaded not guilty. Unable to reach a consensus, the trial was temporarily adjourned. In his dream, Yi Chan had seen Hongju being chased by a killer. Extremely worried about his girlfriend, he met her to tell her about his dream. He asked if she'd reported on any relevant cases, but when she only mentioned a story about a cat, he felt slightly relieved. For safety, however, she promised him that if she was ever in danger, he would see it in his dreams. She agreed to inform him of the time and location. Only then could Yi Chan protect her. The trial resumed. The prosecution team observed closely. Prosecutor Shin presented the suspect's phone search history. On the day of his brother's death, The suspect had searched for information online. These searches revealed his motive and actions. Fearing discovery, he searched for ways to avoid an autopsy and quickly cremated his brother's body. He also searched for information on death insurance claims. Ultimately, he took his brother's life for a 2.7 billion won insurance payout. However, this wasn't enough. Yu Bam twisted the evidence into a completely different narrative. He argued the suspect searched for ways to avoid an autopsy to preserve his brother's body. The hasty cremation was due to financial constraints, preventing a lengthy funeral. The insurance money was presented as a final gift from the brother to his family. Feeling that they hadn't defeated him, Prosecutor Shin presented a tampered car dashcam recording. She suspected it was altered to conceal something, but Yu Bam had a different interpretation. He pointed out the close sibling relationship between the defendant and the victim. Furthermore, he argued that if the suspect wanted to erase evidence, he would have simply destroyed the black box. He highlighted discrepancies in the voices on the recording, arguing it was insufficient to convict. From their first meeting, the suspect had confessed to his lawyer that his brother didn't die from an accident but from poisoning. This was Yu Bam's trump card. He presented evidence showing the victim died of cardiac arrest, relying on testimony from emergency responders. He highlighted inconsistencies in blood volume and body temperature, incompatible with a recent accident, since the prosecution pursued charges of causing death by accident. Even with a 99% likelihood, a 1% chance of death by heart failure resulted in an acquittal. With his ironclad arguments, the judge declared the defendant not guilty, much to everyone's outrage. Unable to accept the verdict, Yi Chan reinvestigated the case. The day of Hongju's dream-predicted accident arrived. He anxiously called to check on her. After confirming she was safe, he resumed his investigation. In Yi Chan's dream, Kang was arrested for poisoning his brother. His roommate was shocked when Yi Chan discovered an anomaly. It turned out that upon receiving the body, he had noticed the blood had changed color from red to green, a sign of poisoning. At that moment, the younger sister was waiting at a cafe for her older brother. She had been at the trial, and after hearing the recording, she recognized the voice as her older brother's, not her third brother's. Coincidentally, Wu Tak and Hongju were also there investigating the poisoning case. Mio sensed something was wrong. Wu Tak went into the cafe to investigate but was unexpectedly stabbed by the suspect. Seeing her friend in danger, Hongju fought the attacker and quickly dragged the younger sister away. The attacker pursued them to the rooftop. At the critical moment, Yi Chan arrived like an angel, rescuing her. They clashed like wild animals. With his strength, he easily overpowered him. However, a moment of carelessness allowed the attacker to corner him. Enraged, the attacker beat Yi Chan severely. But that was all he could manage. Yi Chan stalled long enough for backup to arrive. After the attacker was apprehended, Yi Chan rushed to his girlfriend, reassuring her, "It's okay, it's over." The next morning, Wu Tak woke up after surgery. Despite the pain, he was more worried about an Ngai, presumably Hongju's nickname. Everything turned out well. Yi Chan returned to the office to the admiration of his colleagues. He was largely credited with arresting Kang, and his superiors entrusted him with full authority over the case. On his way to the interrogation room, he encountered lawyer Yu Bam. Yi Chan was curious why he wasn't representing his client anymore. Even though his client would pay a massive sum, Yu Bam had an unspoken rule. He wouldn't gamble without the odds in his favor. Before leaving, Yu Bam asked Yi Chan to relay a message to Kang. Whatever he does, he can't reload. Kang went mad upon learning he'd been abandoned. He refused to cooperate without his lawyer. News reports of Kang's case aired nationwide. Based on previous indictments and his lack of remorse, he was sentenced to life imprisonment. After Wu Tak's stabbing, Hongju was consumed by guilt. Her desire to investigate the person behind Mio's poisoning had led her to bring Wu Tak to the cafe. If not for her selfish act, he wouldn't have been so seriously injured. Although she didn't show it, Yi Chan dreamt of her crying alone in the park. So, he waited for her with tissues. Not only her, but Yi Chan also felt responsible for asking Wu Tak to protect her. But because of that, Hongju was safe. Perhaps Wu Tak felt fortunate that everything had worked out. Seeing her crying reminded Yi Chan of his own past, when he forged his report card, disappointing his father. A colleague of his father had comforted him. That's something you can't change. You can slowly make amends. From now on, there will come a time when your father won't be disappointed in you. This time, it was his turn to comfort her. He would be her support when she felt weak. The day Wu-tak was discharged, he suggested staying at Hongju's place for a few days, surprising Yi-chan. To repay him for saving her life, she readily agreed, much to Yi-chan's dismay. That evening, when his younger brother returned home, he thought a burglar had broken in. The apartment was in shambles, wrecked by the dog Wu-tak had asked him to look after. Yi-chan nonchalantly watched his fallen flag, presumably a game-related item, happily grilling meat. Wu-tak then called, ordering him to buy perilla leaves for the barbecue. Despite his annoyance, Yi-chan obeyed. Not only him, but Hongju was also tasked with buying personal items. Wu-tak gleefully monitored their progress by phone. Finally, they both returned home with their purchases. Although Yi-chan offered to carry her things, she refused, not wanting to owe anyone anything. This bothered him. He asked, "Can I be an exception?" Hongju was flustered, her heart racing. As Yi-chan leaned in to kiss her, their seatbelts prevented him. To escape the awkwardness, he brought up their past relationship to distract her. Unexpectedly, Hongju kissed him, leaving him stunned at the doorway. Even Hongju couldn't believe her impulsive act. While returning home happily, Yi-chan received an envelope full of money. It was from his father's former colleague, the deserter who had shot his father. The money was from the deserter's brother as yearly compensation. Yi-chan didn't want to accept it. The next morning, Yi-chan cheerfully waited outside his neighbor's house for Hongju. In contrast to his enthusiasm, she was sullen and embarrassed after their kiss. Though together, she kept her distance, forcing him to pull her closer. Hongju insisted she didn't remember anything from the previous night, despite his reminders of their feelings. Their relationship progressed better than expected. After days of staying with them, Wu-tak finally returned home. At the same time, the nation was shocked by the murder of a female athlete, a crime foreseen in a dream. Wu-tak found himself being interrogated by prosecutors. He awoke with a start to a phone call. Hongju frantically called, saying she dreamt of the murderer breaking into his house, urging him to lock his doors before sleeping. But it was too late. Facing Wu-tak was a wanted fugitive. They were high school classmates. Yo-young sought Wu-tak's help to secure an acquittal, threatening to reveal a shocking secret to the police if he refused. Wu-tak seemed to have anticipated this, preparing a letter of resignation. Coldly and without hesitation, he told Yo-young to turn himself in. He would resign. Yo-young was distraught by his friend's ruthlessness, weeping like a child in despair. Worried about him, Hongju went to Wu-tak's house to check on him. The police arrived to arrest the suspect. She was surprised to see Wu-tak cry for the first time. Although she had many questions, she restrained herself. Early in the morning, looking out the window, Yi-chan saw his fallen flag, referring to the character in his game with another character. He rushed downstairs, intervening before they embraced, mirroring a dream he'd had. Wu-tak, sensing his feelings, stepped back. They had breakfast together to discuss important matters. On TV, Yo-young was reporting his arrest and pleading his innocence. Seeing his friend's suffering was painful for Wu-tak, who, having known him for a long time, believed Yo-young wasn't the killer. Yi-chan surprisingly questioned his certainty. "If everyone understood people's hearts, we wouldn't need prosecutors or courts. You can't be certain of anything until you investigate," he replied. The evidence was stacked against Yo-young. He was the only person in the video, and his escape from the police was suspicious. In Hongju's dream, she saw Wu-tak saying he believed Yo-young because they were friends, not because he thought him innocent. The revelation that his son was the murderer brought a torrent of criticism to his mother's shop. To protect her, Wu-tak advised her to close for a while. However, his mother remained convinced of her son's innocence, believing him to be wrongly accused. The victim's family was determined to see Yo-young punished. They hired lawyer Yu-bam to exact revenge, employing any means necessary. Yu-bam worked to turn public opinion against the suspect. He gave Hongju Yo-young's profile. His father had a criminal record for drug use. Yo-young had been arrested for assault and theft in college. He was portrayed as a despicable person. This was a juicy story for the media, given the high-profile nature of the case. Public outcry would bring in a swarm of skilled investigators, taking the burden off the prosecution. The decision rested with Hongju. Would she release this information for the benefit of her publication, or trust Yi Chan? On her way home, Hongju recalled her painful past. Her father sacrificed himself to stop the deserter, resulting in his death. After the funeral, she and a friend followed the killer's brother's car to a river. The uncle, seeking atonement for his brother's actions, tried to take his own life. Fortunately, the children jumped into the river and saved him. The day arrived for Wu Tak to testify for his friend. Before the interrogation, he wanted to see Yo Young one last time. Yo Young was anxious about his continued detention. He begged his friend to find the real killer before it was too late. Wu Tak was his last hope. Before starting the interrogation, Yi Chan invited his seniors to observe, as it was a significant case that even the chief was paying close attention to. The moment he stepped into the interrogation room, Yi Chan exuded an air of confidence that impressed his seniors. According to inside sources, he graduated from the police academy with honors and was personally awarded a Medal of Honor by the Prime Minister. This presented a formidable challenge for Yi Chan in this interrogation. After exchanging friendly greetings, the two quickly got down to business. Yi Chan asked Wu Tak about his thoughts after learning about his friend being wanted. Honestly, from the beginning, Wu Tak also misunderstood his friend as the perpetrator, especially since only Yo Young appeared on the security camera footage on the day of the incident. The prosecutors continued to raise their suspicions, pointing to the strange bloodstains in the house. They suggested the perpetrator must have used some tool to create them and then erased all traces. However, Wu Tak confidently defended his point of view, stating that the prosecutor's job was to find out what that tool was, not to sit there and cast suspicions. He argued that mere suspicion couldn't be used as evidence in court. The seniors observing from outside were surprised by Wu Tak's tight reasoning. Even Yi Chan was being completely outmaneuvered by the police officer. The prosecutor asked if he had advised Yo Young to surrender, but his answer surprised everyone. Instead of advising his friend to confess, Wu Tak said that if he were the perpetrator, he should run away. From their initial encounter, if Yo Young were truly guilty, he would have asked Wu Tak to help him escape punishment. He pointed out that Yo Young had asked him to prove his innocence, and furthermore, he had no motive to kill the victim. Who would bother to sort the victim's recycling while in a fit of rage? The seniors began to see the case differently. This was precisely why Yi Chan invited them to persuade them. Due to the lack of evidence against Yo Young, and thanks to Hongju, he was released after a long day. Tired, Yi Chan was eager to see his girlfriend. He shared all his arguments with her, from the short time frame of the crime, which wouldn't allow the perpetrator to erase all traces, to the illogical bloodstains on the floor. He concluded that pinning Yo Young as the perpetrator didn't make sense. While discussing the case, Yi Chan suddenly confessed his feelings, surprising Hongju. In her dream, Hongju had seen him buying an engagement ring, but not knowing her ring size. So, this time, she revealed it to him in advance, making his preparations easier. Yo Young's acquittal caused a public uproar. Newspapers claimed he was released due to the prosecution's superficial investigation and failure to fulfill their responsibilities. Lawyer Yu Baeum was also furious that he couldn't prosecute. So, he decided to hold a press conference to disclose details surrounding the investigation. He dredged up Yo Young's past offenses, skillfully weaving a narrative that portrayed Yo Young as a likely repeat offender, implying there would be more victims in the future, and holding the prosecution accountable for it. Wu Tak explained to everyone about his friend's past offenses, even though they were minor infractions that were still prosecuted. Things didn't stop there. Even Yi Chan's information was dug up by the press and posted online. People accused him of accepting bribes to release the only suspect in the case. Everyone involved was subjected to unreasonable public anger. Protesters gathered in front of the prosecutor's office, pressuring them to reinvestigate the case. Yi Chan had to disguise himself to sneak into his office. The public scrutiny of Yi Chan led to his family facing judgment and criticism. Even Yi Chan's younger brother faced ostracization and rumors at school. Things went too far when a classmate, whose father was in prison, was mercilessly teased. Furious at the malicious taunts, the boy lashed out, starting a fight. Yi Chan's brother struggled to break up the chaotic brawl. Meanwhile, Hongju dreamt of a stranger attacking Yi Chan, knocking him unconscious. Concerned for his safety, she confided in Wu Tak to devise a plan to deal with the potential assailant. She described the attacker as about 1.8 meters tall and dressed entirely in black. The description eerily matched Yo Young, from his clothing style to his physique. Wu Tak keenly sensed the resentment in his friend's eyes, stemming from being publicly vilified as a murderer. To better protect Yi Chan, Hongju scrolled through online comments about the case. The growing negativity directed at her boyfriend distressed her. But among the comments, one stood out, unveiling a vital clue. An anonymous user pointed out that the bloodstains resembled the tracks left by a robotic vacuum cleaner, perfectly mirroring the blood patterns at the crime scene. Simultaneously, after questioning the housekeeper, Yi Chan also deduced the true nature of the bloodstains. This was coupled with crucial information regarding the victim's health. She suffered from fainting spells. All the pieces of the puzzle clicked into place. The victim likely fainted, hitting her head on the table's edge, resulting in a severe neck injury and subsequent blood loss. The robotic vacuum then smeared the blood along its cleaning path. Now, their priority was locating the vacuum to substantiate their theory. All the discarded items were collected at the landfill. This meant Yi Chan and his colleague had to work overtime, painstakingly sifting through the mountain of refuse. Just as they were about to begin their daunting task, a familiar sound reached their ears. It was Hongju's group, who had already arrived and started searching for the vacuum. A wave of gratitude washed over Yi Chan as he embraced his girlfriend. Then, a voice called out from atop the garbage pile, drawing everyone's attention. Hongju's senior had triumphantly located the robotic vacuum. Now, all they needed were the blood test results to definitively close the case. Their hard work paid off. The results confirmed the presence of the victim's blood on the robotic vacuum, eliciting cheers of joy. This was the conclusive evidence needed to put the case to rest. However, matters weren't so straightforward. The newspaper editors pressured their reporters to write articles that painted the prosecution in a negative light. Simultaneously, Yi Chan's senior advised him to proceed with prosecuting the case to mitigate the damaging public opinion. He recalled a childhood memory of rescuing his father's colleague, who happened to be the brother of a murderer, and receiving forgiveness from the victim's family. Before departing, the woman imparted a piece of wisdom. Anger turns easy tasks into difficult ones. Saving someone was inherently the right thing to do, yet she had been consumed by anger. Fortunately, he had intervened, preventing her from making a decision she would forever regret. Now, Yi Chan was resolute. He would exonerate the innocent man, regardless of the personal repercussions. At the news station, Hongju successfully persuaded her superiors to allow her to produce a news segment focusing on Yo Young. During the interview, Yo Young, overcome with emotion, tearfully proclaimed his innocence. His genuine display of emotion resonated with the public. It was through this news report that Yi Chan finally realized that the little girl from his past was Hongju. Overjoyed, he went to a jewelry store to purchase an engagement ring. To ensure his safety, she asked Wu Tak to confirm Yo Young's whereabouts. Upon receiving confirmation that Yo Young was out drinking with Wu Tak, Hongju breathed a sigh of relief and went to meet her boyfriend. A loud bang erupted, shocking everyone. Yi Chan had been shot, collapsing onto the street, bleeding profusely. Horrified, Hongju rushed to his side, frantically screaming for someone to call an ambulance before it was too late. The shooter, the one who fired the fatal shot, was the father of the deceased athlete. Driven to desperation by Yu Bam's manipulative words, he had set out to eliminate those he believed responsible for his daughter's death. After critically wounding the prosecutor, he drove towards Wu Tak and Yo Young, intending to end their lives as well. Fortunately, the police arrived just in time to intervene, preventing another tragedy. Yi Chan's condition was critical. He had lost a lot of blood. In his delirium, he repeatedly apologized for not recognizing Hongju sooner. He regretted the hurtful words he had spoken when they reunited. If this were his end, he worried that she would blame herself for not saving him. Upon hearing the news of the shooting, everyone rushed to the hospital, their anxiety mounting as the surgery stretched on. Hongju's hands trembled with fear. The image of him collapsing in her arms seared into her memory. The future she had fought so hard to change had taken a devastating turn. She sobbed uncontrollably in her mother's arms until Wu Tak arrived with the joyous news: the surgery was successful. Yi Chan had narrowly escaped death. Waking up after the lengthy surgery, Yi Chan remained disoriented, even mistaking his boss for Hongju. Back at home, Yi Chan's mother gave Hongju the gift he had bought for her. Opening the ring box, she was surprised to find a small piece of paper inside. It was the same note she had given to her childhood friend years ago. It dawned on her. Yi Chan was that boy, the one who had shared some of the most painful moments of her life. Meanwhile, it seemed the lawyer wasn't satisfied with the investigation's outcome. Prosecutor Shin requested both Wu Tak and Yi Chan to participate in a cross-examination. She had uncovered the photos Yu Bam had sent to the grieving father, the catalyst for his vengeful rampage. He had exploited Wu Tak's connection to the prosecutor to further provoke the victim's family. However, in his arrogance, Yu Bam made a critical error. While gloating about the prosecutor's ability to alter evidence, Wu Tak pointedly asked if he meant falsifying evidence. It was an unthinkable act, one that even prosecutors wouldn't dare contemplate. Realizing his blunder, Yu Bam tried to backpedal, but it was too late. Prosecutor Shin had seized upon his slip-up and ordered a thorough investigation into the lawyer's activities. Dressed to impress, Hongju arrived at the hospital to visit Yi Chan, only to be met with an unexpected sight: Yi Chan embracing another woman. He only realized his embarrassing mistake when he saw Hongju standing before him. The other woman clung to him, unwilling to let go. Annoyed at seeing her boyfriend being taken advantage of, Hongju stepped forward to assert her claim. With the rival dispatched, they finally had a moment alone. Yi Chan, noticing she wasn't wearing the ring he had given her, asked if she had found the note inside the box. To his surprise, Hongju feigned ignorance, claiming not to remember the events of 13 years ago. Yi Chan was deeply disappointed by her response. He vividly remembered every moment of that fateful day. The next day, Yi Chan and Prosecutor Shin went to the hospital room to question the shooter. Witnessing the father's grief over the loss of his daughter, Yi Chan's heart softened. Instead of interrogating him as a prosecutor, he shared his own impressions of the daughter, expressing his understanding of the father's anger. During the investigation, he had encountered many people who knew the daughter. They all spoke of her with respect, admiration, and affection. Even Yo Young, the prime suspect, had described her as a good person. This is the biggest proof that she wasn't being frivolous. He hoped that her father wouldn't misunderstand his kind-hearted daughter. She was absolutely not someone who could evoke resentment. Hearing his sincere words, the old father couldn't hold back his tears. The victim's family had let go of their resentment and apologized to him. Suddenly, Yi Chan remembered everything in the past. Just to see her, he defied the heavy rain and risked his dangerous injury to run out and find her. Luckily, the dream had forewarned her about this. That's why she had returned to the hospital to find him. Hongju also remembered the events of 13 years ago. Because she was so scared and wanted to forget the moment of hesitation when saving someone, she deliberately forgot everything. So this time, he wanted to meet her to thank her for everything. Instead of words, Hongju decided to use a kiss to express all the pent-up emotions she had held onto for so long. From the past to the present, he had always been the brightest light she could never forget. While driving home, lawyer Yu Bam suddenly received a call from an unknown number. Even though it was after working hours, when he heard the caller's name, the famous writer Mun, he immediately turned his car around and headed back to his office. Yu Bam was curious why the nationally renowned author wanted to meet him so late at night. The writer revealed he was writing a new novel about a murderer. The murderer was a writer and also a professor. With his years of experience as a lawyer, Yu Bam immediately recognized that the protagonist of the story was his client sitting right there. It all started at the launch of the new book when one of the professor's teaching assistants stood up to accuse him of exploiting and mistreating other students. But before he could finish, he was dragged out by security. The professor, furious at being publicly embarrassed, killed him. It seemed a child had unintentionally witnessed everything that had just happened. The teaching assistant suffered a severe head injury, leading to a coma, or brain death in medical terms. Yu Bam had handled many cases like this before, so he quickly twisted the story to make it sound plausible. The protagonist wasn't the killer. The teaching assistant, drunk at the party, had accidentally fallen from the elevator. The South Korean constitution doesn't recognize brain death as death, except in cases of cardiac arrest. Hearing this, the professor was overjoyed. With his bossy nature, he didn't hesitate to order the lawyer to make him a cup of coffee, irritating Yu Bam. He started to get annoyed with the author's words and attitude. "Remember, you're asking me to defend you," he thought. "You're a criminal now, so understand your position. Your life is in my hands." Coincidentally, Hongju was also present at the book launch to report on it. After witnessing the teaching assistant expose the writer's wrongdoings, she suspected he had used grades to suppress and mistreat his assistants. She planned to interview the teaching assistant after the launch, but the unfortunate accident occurred. The next day, Yi Chan was discharged from the hospital. To make it easier to care for his injuries, Hongju suggested he stay at her house for a few days. Despite her younger brother's attempts to stop her, she dragged him inside. However, her mother seemed displeased by his presence. Yi Chan was meticulously cared for by his girlfriend, from bandaging his wounds to taking his temperature. She did everything skillfully, all thanks to the experience she gained while caring for Wu Tak. Hearing his girlfriend say this, Yi Chan seemed unhappy. Every time he lay down, he imagined the other two being affectionate with each other, making him burn with jealousy. Because of his presence in the house, Hongju even made an effort to dress up more nicely even when she slept. She asked her mother if she had seen the wedding box she left on the dressing table, but her mother denied knowing anything about it. She was also very annoyed that her daughter mentioned her relationship with her boyfriend so early in the morning. Wu Tak drove to her house for breakfast that morning. When he saw Hongju's gloomy expression, he realized she had also experienced the same strange dream. In the dream, he saw Yi Chan lose his case and resign. Because of this, the two were unsure how to talk to him about it. Yi Chan, at that moment, happened to overhear part of the conversation about his own misfortune. To prevent this dark future from befalling her boyfriend, Hongju decided to take him away from work. They went on a date to a barley farm full of flowers. At this point, Yi Chan couldn't hide his curiosity and asked her directly about what happened in the dream. Having no other choice, Hongju had to tell him the truth. The next day at work, he would be forced to make a difficult decision. A brain-dead patient had suffered a head injury in an accident. However, when he investigated, he learned that the injury wasn't accidental, but the result of foul play. So he decided to perform an autopsy and catch the perpetrator. The problem was that the brain-dead patient had signed an organ donation form for 7 other people. If an autopsy was performed, the patient couldn't donate his organs, and the fate of the 7 patients would be sealed. It was this dilemma that led to his resignation in the dream. If he didn't perform the autopsy, the perpetrator would go free, and he would be tormented by guilt, leading him to quit his job anyway. Both choices led to a bad outcome, so Yi Chan decided he would run away to the beach with her. That evening, as they were heading home together, his younger brother stopped him. His luggage had been returned by his girlfriend's mother that morning. Although annoyed by her mother's strange behavior, Hongju didn't ask any questions. Although she felt bad for him, she couldn't bear to see her daughter suffer again. The next morning, as planned, they both went to the beach, but he was wearing his work clothes. Hongju seemed to understand her boyfriend's desire to go to work, so she encouraged him to resolve the case properly. At the same time, the writer had found the child who witnessed the entire incident. Fortunately, Wu Tak arrived in time to apprehend him and bring him to the station. He immediately called Yi Chan to inform him about finding the crucial witness. Knowing that the most important factor in the case had been found, Yi Chan immediately met with his superiors to discuss the decision to perform an autopsy. This meant the patient wouldn't be able to donate his organs. He didn't know that his senior also had a young child waiting for a kidney transplant. This was the family's last hope. Before things got worse, 2 opposing opinions were presented. If his judgment was wrong, 7 patients waiting for organ transplants would lose their chance to live. Despite being heartbroken by this information, as a mother herself, Prosecutor's son decided to support his judgment. The autopsy should be performed. Each choice came with significant risks, so Yi Chan decided to perform the surgery and organ donation simultaneously. In the history of legal cases, only 2 cases had been performed in this manner. The victims in those cases, like this one, suffered brain injuries, not organ damage. The autopsy revealed bruising on the neck without any damage to the internal organs. They could examine the neck and brain to determine the cause of death. Seeing the feasibility of this approach, his proposal was approved by his superiors. Despite his confident presentation, Yi Chan now hid in a corner, blaming himself. What would he do if his judgment was wrong? To comfort her boyfriend, Hongju went to his workplace to encourage him. In her dream, she saw him successfully apprehend the perpetrator and simultaneously save the 7 patients needing organ transplants. Although it was just a white lie, it greatly boosted his confidence in his decision. The organ transplant surgery was also performed that day. The grieving father sobbed uncontrollably beside his son's remains, yet he was also proud that his son's life had saved others. Meanwhile, in the meeting room, everyone advised him to change the charges from murder to intentional injury. It would be very difficult to prove murder in court. If there were any discrepancies, the defendant could be acquitted. But Yi Chan completely disagreed. All the evidence pointed to murder. No matter how difficult it was, he would pursue this case to the end. Today was the day of the preliminary hearing. Yi Chan, representing the prosecution, presented photos capturing the professor exploiting and even assaulting his teaching assistants for their perceived disrespectful attitudes. On the day of the book launch, the assistant had stood up to denounce the writer's crimes, but he was stopped. Immediately afterward, the defendant called the victim out and assaulted him. However, the defense lawyer presented a different story. The defendant claimed the assault was an act of self-defense. The assistant was drunk and couldn't control his emotions. After the defendant left, the assistant angrily kicked the elevator door, causing him to accidentally fall into the elevator shaft. With all this, Yu Bam firmly denied the murder charge brought by the prosecution. The trial reached a stalemate as the defendant refused to admit guilt, and the crucial evidence presented by the prosecution was refuted by the lawyer. Now, Yi Chan only had one last weapon, the testimony of a 5-year-old child present at the scene. The problem was how to communicate effectively with the child to obtain his testimony. Wu Tak advised him to use a childlike voice to befriend the boy. Only when the child felt comfortable and safe would he be able to recount what he saw. Back in his office to retrieve his phone, Yi Chan overheard a conversation between his girlfriend and her mother. His girlfriend's mother didn't want her daughter to continue seeing him. Every time she saw Yi Chan, she was reminded of her deceased husband. She might not know what others thought, but she understood her daughter completely. From her father's death to her boyfriend's injury, everything had caused her daughter pain and self-blame. Hongju, though understanding her mother's feelings, still wanted her to be understanding and like him. Yi Chan was deeply touched by her sincere words, which were his greatest encouragement to win the trial. Today was the day the boy testified. Lawyer Yu Bam deliberately asked confusing questions, making the boy's testimony seem unreliable. If the boy's credibility as a witness was undermined, the defendant would be declared innocent. Yi Chan couldn't let that happen. He cast aside his dignity and adopted a Santa Claus-like persona. Using a childlike voice, he gradually made the boy feel more comfortable sharing what he had witnessed. The boy's account matched the recorded audio evidence gathered by the prosecution. Everyone in the courtroom was outraged by the murderer's inhumanity. This was the strongest attack Yi Chan had prepared. The advantage was now with the prosecution. Only one final trial remained before the verdict. Prosecutor Sun, wanting to repay the organ donor, offered her assistance. With her years of experience as a senior prosecutor, the questions she posed to the forensic team directly targeted the defense lawyer's strategy. All his plans were thwarted. It seemed like victory was firmly in the prosecution's grasp, but Yu Bam played his trump card. He brazenly shifted the responsibility for the murder onto the forensic doctors. According to criminal law, brain death wasn't considered death. Only cardiac arrest could be concluded as death. But it wasn't the defendant who caused the victim's heart to stop, but the doctors. They allowed the heart to stop because they were performing an organ transplant. Therefore, legally, the defendant couldn't be convicted of murder. This was a significant loophole in the Constitution. The victim's family was furious upon hearing these words. Fortunately, Hongju was also present at the trial and helped the father regain his composure. With her intelligence, she also offered Yi Chan a crucial hint to conclude the case. For a legal professional like him, the law couldn't be so loosely interpreted. Because of the defendant, the victim had fallen into a brain-dead state. Even without the transplant, the victim would have died within hours. If not for the defendant's criminal act, the victim wouldn't have died. The law absolutely couldn't be mistaken on this point. The responsibility for the death and the crime had to be clear. His determination and rigorous argumentation led the court to reconsider its decision. Everyone in the courtroom admired the young prosecutor's sense of justice. The writer was sentenced to 7 years in prison for his crime of murder. After all, justice had prevailed. Back home, Hongju had a conversation with her mother. she finally understood the circumstances of her father's accident. Even without her presence, it still would have happened. Therefore, she shouldn't blame herself anymore. The mother was pleased that her daughter had finally broken free from the cycle of guilt. After suffering repeated defeats against Yi Chan, Yu Baiam planned to recruit his close colleagues, including Supervisor Choi. He offered Choi 5 times his current salary at the prosecutor's office. This eventually reached Yi Chan's ears. Although he outwardly expressed confidence that his senior wouldn't be tempted, he felt uneasy inside. He had treated his senior without much consideration lately. To keep his senior colleague, he decided to treat him exceptionally well, from tying his shoelaces to taking pictures together and posting them online. He would use any means necessary to keep his people. Even after work hours, Yi Chan carefully chose his words to persuade Choi to stay. Suddenly, his younger brother handed him a suicide note from his close friend's father. The man claimed he was wrongly imprisoned and had recently died. His younger brother's pleas, coupled with the fact that Yu Baiam was the prosecutor in charge of the case, made Yi Chan suspicious. Meanwhile, to film a reality show, the news station sent Hong Ju to the prosecutor's office for 3 days to gather data. Yi Chan became worried, thinking that his girlfriend's constant presence at his workplace might expose his less than professional moments. His superior, aware of his true nature, suggested Prosecutor Shin as the subject of the documentary instead. Though slightly annoyed, he was secretly grateful to his superior. For Hong Ju, everything went smoothly. Except for a few staged moments by the prosecutors, the footage was excellent, especially the scene where a prosecutor interrogated a suspect. The prosecutor's sharp gaze and firm words, demonstrating their competence, made the suspect confess immediately. Even Hong Ju exclaimed, "Amazing," while witnessing the prosecutor's questioning skills. Back at the office, Yi Chan unexpectedly asked his senior about the recently deceased prisoner. He happened to read the will and the plea of the deceased, which bothered him slightly. However, he reiterated that the case was closed and there was nothing unusual. He had participated in the investigation, so he was certain. Meanwhile, at the police station, Wu Tak had just apprehended someone involved in an illegal transaction. Someone had paid the thief 10 million won to retrieve an old phone. The thief insisted on seeing the prosecutor to prove his innocence. The police contacted Yi Chan to prepare for the interrogation. The entire process was meticulously filmed by the reporter. This thief was a bit unique as he shared the same name as the chief prosecutor. He was also the M, who had been arrested for theft years ago. Upon meeting the prosecutor, he burst into tears, launching into the same sob story from a decade prior. His only daughter had been in a traffic accident, which is why he resorted to theft to care for her. He accepted any investigation or trial, only pleading for his freedom to return to his daughter. The chief prosecutor had heard this story 10 years ago. Furious, he entered the room, warning Yi Chan not to be fooled by the lies. He also requested an arrest warrant, despite the chief's advice. Yi Chan decided to visit the man's home to confirm the truth about his daughter. Upon meeting the landlord, he learned the man lived alone. An uneasy feeling crept over Yi Chan. Although his intuition told him the man was telling the truth, the reality was different. Hong Ju, wanting to comfort him, followed him there. The man's story was true, but it had happened 10 years prior. An elderly street vendor recounted how the man had a young daughter who passed away while he was in prison. If the chief prosecutor had believed his story 10 years ago, the little girl's fate might have been different. Yi Chan felt a weight lift upon hearing his girlfriend's comforting words. He immediately returned to the police station. Yi Chan recounted his visit to the man's home and explained that he knew everything. He sincerely apologized on behalf of the prosecution. His sincerity touched the thief's hardened heart. Because Yi Chan was the first person to believe him, the thief entrusted him with the data on the stolen phone, suggesting it might be useful to the prosecution. Back at the office, Yi Chan delved into the data. It contained mostly ordinary photos, nothing remarkable except for pictures of patients. Supervisor Choi, upon seeing the patients' faces, suddenly froze. They were all victims of the serial murder case he had investigated years ago. Everyone was shocked by this revelation. There weren't just 11 victims as reported, but 19. Yi Chan immediately sought the phone's owner, but it was too late. He had been murdered to cover up the truth. At the same time, Hong Ju went to the victim's apartment to investigate further. They were both unexpectedly locked inside by a stranger who then set the room on fire. Trapped, they had no way out. Miraculously, Supervisor Choi appeared just in time, saving them both from the jaws of death. Although he scolded them severely for putting themselves in danger, he was deeply relieved they were safe. They were then taken to the hospital for a checkup. Yi-chan was curious how his senior knew where to find them, but Choi refused to explain. The information Yi-chan uncovered was reported to higher authorities. Everyone was horrified to learn that 8 more victims had been confirmed. They hadn't been included in the initial report because they died after the suspect's arrest. He suspected the real culprit was someone else, or perhaps an accomplice. The man caught in last night's fire wasn't the phone's owner, he'd merely received it from someone else. It was highly likely the arsonist and the serial killer were the same person. Things were heating up. Details from the old case were starting to connect with last night's events. The necessary action now was to reopen the investigation. Prosecutor Lee had been unusually pensive since the start of the meeting. After assigning specific tasks, he asked Yi-chan if he was alright. Reopening the investigation meant the previous one had made a mistake. Yi-chan would have to investigate lawyer Yu Bam and even Advisor Choi. Advisor Choi could face severe disciplinary action if there were errors. Now, Yi-chan faced a difficult dilemma, his personal feelings versus his professional duty. While he understood what kind of person his advisor was, as a prosecutor, he was obligated to suspect even those he didn't want to. Yi-chan curiously asked his senior why he knew he and the reporter hadn't arrived together. Why did he know he was there to rescue him? Advisor Choi simply replied it was a hunch, a feeling of suspicion. Everyone in the office was discussing the old case, most believing Advisor Choi colluded with the lawyer to falsify the report. To protect his advisor, Yi-chan had to relentlessly pursue the investigation. Returning to the office with a heavy heart, Advisor Choi decided to submit his resignation so Yi-chan could focus on the case. Meanwhile, at Task Force 2, Yi-chan, after seeing Advisor Choi's file, discovered he was a former colleague of his father. He rushed back to the office, but it was too late. Advisor Choi had resigned and left. In his farewell letter, he stated clearly he hadn't fabricated evidence. But as the prime suspect, his words carried no weight. He urged Yi-chan not to worry about him and to investigate the old case impartially. After reading these words, Yi-chan finally woke up. That night, when Hongju went to the convenience store, the clerk recognized her as the reporter who interviewed his father before the trial. He was angry that she seemed to disregard his father's feelings. Hongju then noticed the green umbrella nearby, the same one from her dream. A sudden fear gripped her, paralyzing her. Luckily, Yi-chan appeared just in time, informing her the old case would be reopened. The news moved the clerk deeply. After so many years, his father's case would finally be re-examined, his name cleared. The next day, while enjoying his coffee at work, lawyer Yu Bam received a strange message. Someone was watching his every move. He grew anxious when the person suggested a meeting at 9 p.m. At the same time, the prosecution identified the person who bought the gasoline. Surprisingly, it was a woman. She was also the prime suspect in both the arson and the old case. And at that moment, she appeared before Yu Bam. She was the one sending the threatening messages. If she was caught, he would go to jail too. Yu Bam was furious, feeling blackmailed by Yo Young, the culprit from the old case. He was the one who falsified the evidence to help her escape punishment, sending the innocent doctor to prison. Now, there was no way out. She had already dealt with the lover who knew the truth. Only one person remained, the reporter who covered the old case, Hongju. The next day, the lawyer invited her to his office. Without a second thought, Hongju drank the drugged water. Yi-chan awoke from a terrifying dream where his girlfriend's life was in danger. He immediately called Wu Tak, asking him to check on Hongju at the lawyer's office. After she fainted, Hongju was taken to the rooftop to be eliminated. The perpetrator injected her with a drug that would cause her to suffocate within 5 minutes. After witnessing the injection, the lawyer, Yu Bam, smirked, swallowed a pill himself, and then moved to confront the attacker. Just then, police sirens wailed below. Yu Bam wanted to silence the killer to protect himself. If caught, he could claim self-defense. At that moment, Wu Tak reached the rooftop, horrified to see Yu Bam holding Hongju. Yi-chan arrived just in time, performing first aid until the ambulance arrived. The next day, Yu Bam woke up in the hospital. He claimed he was drugged through his coffee and started losing consciousness when he saw a woman, Du Han, taking Hong Ju out of the office. With his remaining strength, he followed to prevent the attacker from harming the reporter, but it was too late. He revealed that Du Han was the real culprit behind the serial murders years ago. Despite urging her to confess, she refused. He speculated that she saw him and the reporter together, misunderstood, and drugged the water. Then, in an attempt to save Hong Ju, Yu Bam struggled with the attacker, resulting in her fall. He claimed she injected Hong Ju with poison before falling. He feigned remorse in front of the police to manipulate public opinion. But when the police informed him that Hong Ju was alive, he panicked, fearing his charade would be exposed. Yi Chan was relieved his girlfriend survived. He knew it was a close call, a minute later, and the outcome could have been tragic. Hearing Yu Bam's self-defense claim, Yi Chan was furious, wanting to confront him. Fortunately, advisor Choi intervened. He shared a story about his younger brother who deserted the army. He felt guilty for covering for him, which led to his brother killing many people, including Choi's boss. Yi Chan, overwhelmed with emotion, questioned why Choi was telling him this. His anger reached a boiling point. He wanted to find Yu Bam and unleash his fury. But his senior stopped him. If he assaulted Yu Bam now, the court would revoke his prosecutor status. The best revenge was patience, waiting for the trial, where he would make Yu Bam pay dearly for his crimes. Back on the investigation, the prosecution gathered evidence related to the wrongful conviction. The perpetrator's death closed many cases, but everyone now focused on Yu Bam's fabrication of evidence. He was on thin ice. The director of his law firm personally defended him. Witnessing his junior's evasiveness, he realized Yu Bam was guilty. However, the firm's reputation was paramount. He urged Yu Bam to confess before the news broke. Finally, the good news arrived. Hong Ju woke up. Yi Chan rushed to the hospital, overjoyed to see her safe. He felt a weight lift off his shoulders. To ensure her safety, he requested police protection for her as a key witness. Officer Wu Tak was assigned the task. Now, Yi Chan could focus on the upcoming trial. At Yu Bam's preliminary hearing, the defense refuted all the prosecution's evidence and requested witness testimonies. It seemed the trial would be lengthy. To prepare, Yi Chan took everyone out for drinks to boost morale. Suddenly, Wu Tak's phone lit up, revealing his wallpaper, a picture of him and Hong Ju. Recognizing her, Yi Chan was surprised. Hong Ju, still oblivious, wondered who took the picture with her friend. After she left, Yi Chan suggested they pretend not to know, allowing Wu Tak and Hong Ju to continue their budding friendship. The day of the crucial trial arrived. Everyone was anxious about the final verdict. Yu Bam remained smug, convinced he would escape punishment. He even advised Yi Chan to follow his lawyer's instructions, but Yi Chan ignored him, determined to put him behind bars. Advisor Choi was the first witness called by the defense. According to the indictment, the prosecution accused Yu Bam of fabricating crucial evidence by adding the poison bottle to the crime scene report. Crucially, the handwriting at the end of the seized items list belonged to Advisor Choi. He explained that when they re-examined the evidence, noticing the missing poison bottle, he added it to the list. This aligned with Wu Tak's dream, increasing his fear of Yu Bam's acquittal. When the lawyer asked Choi who was most likely to fabricate evidence, he didn't hesitate to point to Yu Bam. Since Choi only assisted the prosecution, Yu Bam received all the accolades after the case, giving Choi no motive to tamper with evidence. The advantage shifted to the prosecution. The second witness was Hong Ju, the victim from the rooftop incident. She testified that while being dragged to the rooftop, she clearly saw two people holding umbrellas. This contradicted Yu Bam's claim that only Du Han carried her, as she wouldn't have been able to hold an umbrella simultaneously. However, if two people were involved, the presence of two umbrellas made perfect sense. Now it was the defense lawyer's turn. He handed Hong Ju a drug information sheet, asking her to read a highlighted section about the drug's side effects, which included hallucinations. Based on this, he confidently dismissed all her accusations against his client. Things took a turn for the worse as Hong Ju's testimony lost credibility, bringing the scales of justice back to equilibrium. The trial's outcome now rested entirely on Wu Tak's testimony. He felt the pressure, knowing the fate of the case was in his hands. Hongju rushed to him, reminding him of the umbrella's colors. He was surprised she knew about his color blindness. Previously, she'd asked him for a red portable charger, but he'd given her a blue one. Hongju had noticed. If his color blindness was revealed during his testimony, he would be dismissed from the police force. Terrified of this outcome, she urged him to run away. But Wu Tak's conscience wouldn't allow it. He embraced her, determined to face the truth he'd hidden for so long. Back in court, after being sworn in, Wu Tak was questioned by the prosecution. He recounted everything that happened on the rooftop. He testified to seeing Yu Bam carrying Hongju downwards, with no one else around except for 2 abandoned umbrellas. Upon inspection, both umbrellas bore the suspect's fingerprints, proving the perpetrator intended to leave with Yu Bam. This crucial evidence completely refuted the self-defense claim. Now, only Wu Tak's confirmation of the umbrella's appearance was needed to conclude the trial. He easily described their shapes, but hesitated when it came to their colors. The courtroom held its breath, waiting for his answer. Even Wu Tak was conflicted. Finally, he decided to reveal his color blindness to the court. Everyone was shocked, even Yi Chan, his close friend. Yu Bam smirked, believing he had won. But Yi Chan wasn't giving up that easily. While colorblind, Wu Tak's night vision was superior. Though he couldn't see colors, he could distinguish them by their brightness. He described the long umbrella with a curved wooden handle like a cane, and the folding umbrella with a round metal handle. The long umbrella had the brightness corresponding to the green of Yu Bam's tie, while the small umbrella matched the red of the prosecutor's robes. The courtroom was stunned when images of the umbrellas were presented, perfectly matching Wu Tak's description. The trial concluded with the prosecution victorious. Yu Bam's hopes of acquittal were dashed. Though instrumental in putting the culprit behind bars, Wu Tak had to sacrifice his beloved career as a police officer. He had fulfilled his duty with exemplary dedication. After the trial, Advisor Choi visited Yu Bam in jail, urging him to confess and seek leniency. Yu Bam was enraged, feeling betrayed by his former colleague. Choi pleaded with him to accept responsibility and seek redemption. Looking at Yu Bam reminded Choi of his deserting brother. He wondered if things would have turned out differently had he urged his brother to confess instead of protecting him. But Yu Bam refused to listen. Just then, Yi Chan spotted Advisor Choi. Before he could reach his mentor, Yu Bam, in a desperate act, drove a car into Choi. Yi Chan cradled his dying mentor in his arms, heartbroken. From the moment Choi rescued him from the icy river, he'd dreamt of this day, a day where Choi would peacefully pass away in his arms. Advisor Choi's funeral was filled with grieving colleagues, especially Yi Chan. He mourned deeply for the man who had been a friend, brother, and uncle, offering unwavering support. Soon after, Yu Bam received his final sentence, life imprisonment. Life went on. Wu Tak focused on studying for law school, his new dream to become a skilled lawyer. The prosecutor's office celebrated the marriage of Prosecutor Lee and Prosecutor Sun. Those Yi Chan had saved found new, happy lives. After many trials and tribulations, Yi Chan and Hongju finally married, starting their life together.